Putin visits Xi Jinping, tests unlimited partnership. Print-friendly, source, David Pierson and Paul Sonne, Putin will visit Xi, testing a no-limits partnership. These two authoritarian leaders announced that the two sides would build a no-limits partnership to push back against what they see as American bullying and interference. Growing challenges from the West are testing the limits of that partnership. Xi is walking an ever-shrinking tightrope, facing growing diplomatic and economic pressure to curtail China's support for Russia and its war in Ukraine. Now, moving closer to Putin will only further alienate Europe, an important trading partner of China's, as Beijing seeks to improve its image in the West and preserve its exports. Exports to revive the weakening economy. Shen Dingli, an international relations scholar in Shanghai, said, China considers Russia an important strategic partner and wants to give Putin due respect, but for economic and other reasons, they also want to maintain good relationships with Europe and America. This is a very difficult balancing act. For his part, while trying to discourage Western nations from helping Ukraine more actively, Putin may at the same time want to test how much Xi Jinping is willing to risk. While Xi was in France meeting with President Emmanuel Macron, Putin ordered exercises to use tactical nuclear weapons. That action was seen as the clearest warning to date that Russia could use tactical nuclear weapons in this war, an approach that Xi has clearly opposed. The Russian leader will likely seek more support from Xi to maintain the country's isolated economy and war machine in Ukraine. Xi just returned from a trip to Europe, where he was flattered in the pro-Russian countries of Serbia and Hungary, and France invited him to enjoy good wine. At the end of his visit to Europe, he had not made any major concessions on trade or on Ukraine. If online meetings are included, Xi has met Putin more than 40 times, more than any other leader. Both often congratulate each other on their birthdays and call each other old friends or best friends. More importantly, they appear to see each other as strategic partners in a major geopolitical competition and will likely use these meetings to present themselves as leaders of an alternative global system. Erode America's dominant position. The goal is to show how closely China and Russia are standing side by side, said Sun Yun, director of the China program at the Stimson Center in Washington. But supporting Russia also makes China a target for Western pressure. The United States claims that even though Beijing does not provide lethal weapons to Russia, it still supports the Kremlin's war efforts by providing satellite intelligence information, fighter aircraft parts, and microcomputers, circuits and other dual-use devices. In addition, as the largest customer of Russian oil, China also fills Moscow's coffers. Washington has imposed sanctions on a series of Chinese companies for their involvement in the war and threatened to blacklist Chinese financial institutions doing business with Russian companies. Beijing's tacit support for Moscow's war in Ukraine has also damaged China's reputation in the European Union. During his visit to France, when questioned about the Russia-Ukraine war, Xi angrily said that China is not the creator of this crisis, nor is it a party to this crisis. China's strategy of standing on two boats may be working. Xi has made no indication that he will use his influence to end the war. And he may not feel the need to do so. China's strategy of aligning itself with Russia while trying to stabilize its relationship with the West, which some have described as a strategy of standing in two boats, may be paying off. China's relationship with the US, which fell to its lowest level in decades last year, is now somewhat more stable. Leaders of major European countries continue to cooperate with Xi, including Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany, who visited Beijing with company executives last month. This approach is winning more domestic support for Xi. Evan S. Medeiros, a professor of Asian studies at Georgetown University, said Chinese scholars and think tank analysts see the situation on the battlefield changing in Russia's favor. For Xi Jinping, the strategy of standing on two boats is working better than they could have imagined, and China has paid very little for it, he said. Xi also needs Russia as a counterweight and his country's competition with the US, expressed on issues such as US support for Taiwan, China's territorial claims in the South China Sea and China's access to advanced technology. China and Russia have stepped up military exercises in the East China Sea, putting pressure on Taiwan, the self-governing island that Beijing claims as its territory. Xiao Bin, an expert on Sino-Russian relations in Beijing, said, even if the Sino-Russian relationship is not that close, political elites in the US may not consider China is a strategic partner but will continue to view China as a potential threat, even an enemy. Putin's growing dependence on China. However, Putin risks becoming too dependent on China to the point of making Russian officials uncomfortable. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, China has become Russia's lifeline, replacing the European Union as Russia's largest trading partner. Putin is still pursuing his own interests. His growing friendliness with North Korea, which is supplying ammunition to Russia, could make both countries less dependent on Beijing. But in the context of isolation from the West, the Kremlin does not have many options left. Putin needs China to buy energy, provide dual-use components such as computer chips to maintain his army and currency, to carry out transactions with foreign countries. Last year, about 89% of the high-priority imports needed for Russia's arms production came from China, according to an analysis of customs data by Nathaniel Scher, a researcher at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Analysis shows the shipments include everything from machine tools used to make military equipment to optical equipment, electronic sensors, and telecommunications equipment. It's more like a survival paradigm. You are in a state of war, said Alexander Gabuev, director of the Carnegie Russia-Eurasia Center and an expert on Sino-Russian relations. He added that, for Putin, hedging risks from China is a luxury he cannot afford.